Good evening or morning or whatever time of the day it happens to be. Welcome one, welcome all to the Writer's Block podcast. My name is Greg Nikes, your host who will occasionally ask an insightful question to his guests. It's rare, but it does happen. And this week, guys, we're sitting down with actress and first-time author Sarah Amini to talk about her debut graphic novel, Mixed Feelings. We'll dive into Sarah's childhood, into middle school and puberty, and just kind of that social outcast feeling we all have at that age, which inspired this book, finding the perfect illustrator to bring her words to life on the page, and so much more. Guys, we'll be off the air next week. That is the week of April 27th, 2026. But we will return the following Monday with some more fun to be had. So just stick around. I'm going to try to put up a few extra videos over on our social media. So stay tuned to our social media. We are at Writers Block Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, where we're going to get some more video content, some more short form reels, and all that fun jazz. I still don't know how social media works, so we're just going to keep barreling through and hopefully something sticks. If you or someone you know wants to be a part of the show, please send an email to writersblockpod@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider leaving us a review or giving us a thumbs up or a comment over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And with that note, housekeeping is out of the way. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's get into the conversation today with Sarah Amini. So, Sarah, you've had a really impressive acting career. You have done TV and film and voiceover, everything from CSI to Future Man to the Insomniac Spider-Man game.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, out of all the parts you've taken on in your career, where does the role of head elf in your elementary school Christmas play rank in your resume?
Where did you find that? That's amazing. Oh gosh, you know what? Because it was one of the first, I will probably rank that at the top because I think it was through being head elf in my elementary school Christmas parade that I discovered my love for acting. So that's pretty, it's an iconic one for me. Yeah.
Iconic's a great word for it. This is your debut novel, Mixed Feelings, and it is
Yes.
a very charming autobiographical look at your middle school days. For
Yeah.
such a personal piece, and as your first novel, I guess what drove you to this subject for your first book, and what was the decision like to do it as a graphic novel?
That's a great question. I had been wanting to write about my life growing up mixed race in Houston, Texas in the 90s for a long time. But at the beginning, it really was just free therapy for me. It was just me writing with no intention of having anyone see it. I was just writing about my experience and my identity issues and things like that. And then as I kept writing, I started forming them into essays. So it was a collection of essays for many years, first person essays. And then my agent suggested that I actually transition it to a graphic novel. She read the essays. She said, your writing is incredibly vivid, especially during those middle school years. You have such detailed memory of what went down those years. And she said, you already have experience writing for TV, and graphic novel writing is very similar. You're setting up a scene, you're framing up, thinking about what goes on the panel, what goes on the shot, and writing dialogue and character. It was at her suggestion and encouragement that I sort of started to see this in a new medium. And I don't draw at all. So I just found my way in by acting out the scenes and then putting it down on paper in little stick figure drawings and then communicating that to Shadia, my illustrator. A very collaborative experience.
Speaking of Shadia, your illustrator
Yeah.
Shadia Amin provides the art. Reading the book, her style feels like it fits in so well with the subject matter. It's got that kind of perfect blend of like cartooniness with the sincerity, with the goofiness. What was the process like of looking for an illustrator, and how did you eventually settle on Shadia?
Yeah, that's an incredibly insightful observation on Shadia. She is so funny and so expressive in her illustrations, and that's exactly what I was looking for because this is based on, my real family and friends, but because I was sort of writing this going, what's the sitcom version of my family? What's the TV version? Because I grew up watching so much television with my parents. I said, what is sort of the way I can characterize the people in my life and push certain quirks of theirs, for humor and for comedic effect, dramatic effect, and heighten, certain lines that they say, certain expressions. So Shadia was really perfect for that, and that I felt like she really got it. And she just took my jokes and really went there with, the humor as far as facial expressions and gestures. And Scholastic had worked with her before, so they pitched her to me and they said, she's really funny, and she's also mixed race. She's Colombian and Lebanese, and you're Colombian and Persian. And so that was really great to have someone who also understood it from not just a storytelling perspective, but from a identity perspective. I was like, oh, this is someone who might actually really relate to the story itself and then be more passionate about telling the story.
And with a project like this, the art is so important, and often it needs to speak as loud, if not louder, than the words do. Can you think of a scene where
Hmm.
you deliberately let Shadia's visuals do the heavy lifting?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I really think that in a lot of the Harry storyline, like I really did wake up one day in the sixth grade and I sprouted hair like a chia pet, and it wasn't there the night before when I went to bed. And I woke up and I was like, what is going on? And so with one of those, with that, I really feel like Shadia really went there, and it's very funny. Whereas when I was experiencing it in the moment, it was very mortifying. Like, you don't want to be called a werewolf and Elvis, when you're walking down the hallways. And so I was constantly trying to hide my sideburns and hide my arm hair. But I really wanted to revisit that moment of my life, that experience, with a lot more humor and compassion than I certainly had for myself as a teenager. So in a lot of those scenes, you're just seeing a lot of like sound effects, and Shadi is doing a lot of the storytelling where I don't have to say anything. You know what it's like to cut yourself when you're shaving super fast. You know what it's like to like steal a razor from your mom and like peek around the door and be like, is she watching? Is she gonna catch on to me? There were so many moments within that storyline where I felt like I didn't need to really say much because she was doing all the heavy lifting.
As mentioned earlier, your love of performance started at such a young age, and that is on full display throughout Parts of Mixed Feelings. And you
Yeah.
do such a great job expressing the weird mix of excitement and anxiety that comes with stage fright, and often like the cartoonish scenarios that a kid's brain can come up with to cope. How close were
Yeah.
those moments to your own experiences performing?
I actually didn't have a whole lot of stage fright as a kid. I had gotten recruited for whatever reason, I don't know, but I had gotten recruited as a kindergartner to perform the Pledge of Allegiance at the fifth grade graduation at my elementary school. And of all the kids, I don't know why they plucked a 6-year-old me, but they did. And I remember having no problem getting up in front of 500 people and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I felt really confident. So the next year, I started doing the head elf in the play, and like that's sort of how I started acting. And because I had no fear, and because I had so much fear and anxiety in my real life, it felt like a really safe place for me. I was someone who constantly lived in their head, and their expressions, their facial expressions, their thoughts read on their face. Like, you can just tell what I'm thinking by the look on my face, and that's a format of storytelling that I use in this book, where she just is like, there's a freeze frame and she's thinking something and it's on her face. And that's really how I felt a lot of the time. So that's why I use the activity of mind meld in the story, where they're playing an improv game and Sarah literally has to get out of her head in order to play the game and be present with her scene partner. And so, improv theater, these were things that were so vital to me in me learning how to be present, how to collaborate, how to be confident, and they were just great lessons.
The story is, as we've talked about, it's ripped from the headlines of your life. When you sat down and began writing this graphic novel with kind of the idea of the illustrations in mind, was there a particular story that you knew right away had to be turned into a scene or turned into a gag, or maybe was there a story that you weren't sure about including but ultimately decided to include?
I didn't know if I wanted to include this audition at the very end of the book, where Sarah goes on a real television audition with her mom, and her mom gets sort of berated for her accent in front of everyone else, in front of all the waiting parents and children at this audition, by the woman who was running the audition. And it's just because, they were like, we've seen enough kids for the day, and her mom is like, but what about all these kids who haven't been seen? Like, that's not fair to them. We've been waiting, all day. And they get into it. And that was a real thing that happened in my life. And so I wasn't sure whether to include it because now I see it so much differently than I did as a kid. When I was a kid, I totally blamed my mom. Like, why did you speak up? And why did you have to say something? Maybe they would have still seen me. And I didn't have that compassion for my mom that I do now, where I realized, oh my God, that was one of my first experiences in racism, like blatant, racism and discrimination. And so I just look at it through a much more compassionate lens. And it's allowed me to have a conversation with my mom, like sort of her perspective and take away from that experience. And ultimately, I decided to include it because I don't know, it was therapeutic for me to include it in a way, and to have Sarah, say, "I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't like how that woman spoke to you," and have Sarah and her mom have a moment that I didn't have in my real life with my mom, because I didn't have the tools as a teenager to understand what was going on.
Yeah, I love the self therapy aspect in a lot of autobiography projects. Like it sounds
Yes.
so freeing.
It really is. It really is, and it's so cathartic and therapizing, like you said, and to be able to relive those moments. Middle school is tough for everyone, and they're very formative years. They're mortifying years, but to be able to have space now, years later, I look at it just with. I think it's funny. I think I'm like, wow, I can't believe I survived that. And I totally in the moment was like, how am I going to survive the sixth grade? And now, I'm like, oh yeah, I survived and then some, and that's a good lesson for me and for kids. Like it feels so monumental in the moment, but you'll get through it. You'll get
Yeah.
through it because you've got friends, family, community that you can lean on.
Was it difficult in the writing process to kind of slip into or maybe find little Sarah's voice again?
I had the collection of essays that were all told in first person. But they were sort of a blueprint that I would look back to and refer to time and time again when I was like, "Oh, I'm kind of stuck here on this one scene." And so I'd already done the foundational work where it was, first person, very intimate storytelling in those essays, that it was easy to sort of tap into young me. And also because in the late 90s, disposable cameras were so huge. I mean, you would just buy one for $4, take all your photos with your friends at the movie theater that weekend, and then go to Walgreens and develop all your pictures. I have so many photos. And even in just looking at those photos, I feel like I could go back in time and go, oh, I remember where I was. I remember we were talking about this boy, and you remember, so it brought back a lot of great memories for me.
You share your struggles with identity very openly in this book, especially feeling insecure about your ethnicity or your body, while seeing other kids so outwardly confident, maybe in their own skin. Looking
Hmm.
back now, how did those experiences shape who you became as an adult, and what advice would you give to kids who are maybe feeling similarly alone?
I was really lucky in that I had found the community in drama club, because a drama club is such a great place for eccentrics and oddballs, and it's a very inclusive environment. It's a place where a lot of people are misfits and they don't feel like they belong anywhere else. It's very ragtag and it's very collaborative, and there were a lot of very confident people in drama club, and I really looked to them, as inspiration, because it wasn't that I wasn't confident, it was just that I didn't know who I was. I just really couldn't figure myself out, and it was so confusing and frustrating. And that was, 2 hours after school where I didn't have to think about who I was. I could just play with my friends and put on silly voices, and those people who were, so confident and in their own skin really allowed me to come out of my own skin too. And so, I guess my advice in that regard is to just find the spaces where you feel like you belong. And that just might be one friend. That might not be a club. That might be one friend that you have where you're like, I can 100% be myself with this person, and just sort of foster that. That could be a sister, that could be, your grandma, your elderly neighbor. But we all have people that we're like, man, this person is not judgmental. They really value me for me, and just keep fostering that, keep bringing out what is unique about you, because when I was a kid I didn't necessarily look at this being mixed race as a positive thing. That's why the book is called Mixed Feelings. I have both, positive and negative feelings about it. But now, as an adult, I go, wow, I don't find anyone else like me. And that's kind of cool, you know?
One scene that really stood out to me, it's during the Harry storyline when little Sarah reaches out to help Miriam, who is a bit of an antagonist throughout the book, and her kindness is rejected.
Yeah.
How important was that moment to you, and what were you hoping that readers would take away about navigating those maybe more complex social relationships with empathy and kindness?
I really just think empathy and kindness leads the way, and you always will end up on top if that is, how you pursue every single situation that you're in, even if it doesn't feel it in the moment, even if it's not reciprocated. And that's hard. It's hard to not, be cynical and be, mean yourself when you're not feeling your best. But I really did try to reach out to certain people. Miriam is sort of a amalgamation of multiple people in my life, and but I did have situations where I was, sort of ridiculed in that environment and felt very alone because I was half Iranian versus, being full Iranian. And it built character, I guess. Like I wasn't always met with kindness back, but I always just try to lead with empathy, and you realize that you're more alike than you are different. And I think Sarah clocked that. Like, oh, Miriam and I, she makes us seem like we're so different, but we're really not that different at all. Just because I'm half doesn't mean we aren't going through the exact same mortifying experience right now. Maybe I can find a way to relate to her in that way. And when she's rejected, it sucks, but she finds other friends she can relate to. So it
Yeah.
works out.
Yeah. You do such a good job at touching on the spirit of the youngsters, I guess, touching on that kid inside of you throughout this book, without it ever really feeling heavy-handed, and you deal with some very heavy things without it ever feeling like that.
Yeah.
When creating something so personal, how do you know when you've said enough?
I was really lucky and that Scholastic, took this on as a series because I felt like I didn't have to cram everything I wanted to say into one book. I could really let it breathe. So the first book is about, navigating, her life as a mixed race girl. The second book touches on another facet of my identity, which is, being the eldest daughter. And being the eldest daughter of immigrants, you have just so much more responsibilities and expectations put upon you than your younger siblings or your brothers. And so that was something I wanted to touch on. And then the third book talks about 9/11 in real time because the attacks happened when I was in the eighth grade. And so I was very lucky in that I was able to let everything sort of breathe and talk about the things I wanted to talk about in each book, touch on certain subjects. And, like you said, there are a lot of really heavy subjects in the three books: racism, xenophobia, bullying, things like this. But the way that I was able to counter that was through, I think, a lot of humor, a lot of heart. I really likened my family to a sitcom family when I was writing this. And what I love about those old school sitcoms is that they're so funny, but then the family just comes together at the end of every episode, and there's so much love within that family. And I thought to myself, well, Sarah can experience all these horrible things that, we all experience in our lives, but as long as she has a home base that's secure, that's safe, that's loving, that she can come back to, then it's okay to talk about these things. And also, there are these dramatized, heightened television moments in the book, and that was another way for me to be able to talk about some of these tougher subjects in a more heightened, hyper reality rather than in her own world. And that was very freeing because I felt like I'm able to talk about this in a way where kids will get it. It's not heavy-handed, and it's funny and weird in a way, but they'll still come back with the message. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that it's out there, what has been the most surprising reaction you've gotten from readers of Mixed Feelings?
What's really great is that my next door neighbors have a son who is a young teenager, and I always pegged this as a book for girls. I always thought in my head, oh, this is just going to be so girl centric, And then he has read it so many times, and and his mom, my neighbor, she goes, well, he's just, he's going through. I think he's going through something like this right now with his friend, and so I guess I was so surprised in my mind, I guess I was so limiting in my head where I went, this is something that's so particular to girls and like female friendships. And it's really not. It's so universal. And he's been reading it a couple times, to try to understand how Sarah navigates friendships changing so that he can understand it himself. And that was very touching and surprising to me.
Yeah, definitely, there's so much to relate to for audiences of all kinds with this book. Like
Yeah.
even me, I found so much. I'm like, oh my God, what other people felt like this? So
That's so great. That's so great. It makes me so happy.
we kind of talked a little bit about it, but this is the first book in the trilogy. Is there
Yep.
anything else that you want to share about the road ahead for Sarah, either on the page or in real life?
Oh, like real life me. Okay. Well, like you said at the beginning, I guess I'll plug the show that I'm on. I'm on a show called The Copenhagen Test. It's on Peacock. It is an action spy thriller, and it just aired in January. So we are waiting for season two, see if it happens. Fingers crossed there. But as far as the books, the second one comes out in October. And it's set in the seventh grade. It is the funniest to me of the three. And what I love about it is that it's set in the year 2000. So it's like right peak AIM era where where Sarah's logging onto the internet and like the line is busy, so her mom can't make a phone call, and like it's going like dial up, and like kids today don't know what that's like. Where you're like, get off the internet! I gotta take a phone call, and she's talking to her crush on AIM, and then she realizes her crush has a crush on someone else, and it's just like this weird triangle, and it's a funny sequel to this book. And then the third one, like I said, 9/11 is a storyline in the third book. While Sarah is like starting to take acting more seriously, she's about to go to high school. She's like touring the drama club there. And then it sort of is navigating a very real identity crisis that I had, where all of a sudden I didn't want to be Middle Eastern. I didn't want to associate with my dad. I was so embarrassed to be half Middle Eastern. And I kept telling everybody that Amini was an Italian last name. And they were like, we've known you for years. No, you're not just all of a sudden Italian. But it was a very real, identity crisis that I had. So all in all, I think, I love tackling some of these harder, broader issues, but with a lot of humor, a lot of silliness, a lot of heightened reality moments, because I think that the message just will get across more effectively than it will if you're just like hammering it over a kid's head. And they're so honest, teenagers, so you're like, they're so blunt, they're so honest, and they'll tell you if they like it, they'll tell you if you won't. So fingers crossed they like it.
I think it'll be a hit for all of
Thank
them.
you.
So I guess wrapping up, I had one more kind of wackier question.
Okay.
So with projects like this, I'm always curious. People write, sometimes authors write stuff just to put it out there, to get the book out there, and sometimes they write it with kind of this backdoor brain of like, maybe it'll be a show, or maybe it'll be a movie, maybe it'll be this. And we have our fan castings that take over in the writing process of like, oh, this is going to be, I don't know, Jeff Goldblum or whoever. In your mind, who is the cast of your family in the Mixed Feelings animated universe?
Oh, oh my gosh, that's a great, great, great question. The only person that vividly comes to mind is I based Mr. Ross, the drama club teacher, on Corky St. Clair from Waiting for Guffman. So you'll see there's a lot of Christopher Guest, overlap with the drama club teacher. And just the other night, I was thinking, if we make a TV show out of this, I think Jesse Tyler Ferguson would make a really great Mr. Ross, because he's sort of Corky St. Clair mixed with my drama club teacher, Mrs. Ross, who was a very petite, fiery redhead. And I was like, I think Jesse Tyler Ferguson is like the perfect brainchild of these two combinations. So that's fan casting for sure. I always really loved Constance Marie. She was the mom in Selena, and she was the mom in the George Lopez show. And she is just a phenomenal Latina actress and just gets comedic timing so well that I feel like she could play my mom. And then as far as my dad, man, that's a tough one. My dad's a tough nut to crack because he's not your stereotypical Persian dad. But there's a comedian named Peter Banafas who is really, really funny, and he always does these videos on Instagram about Persian dads. And so I was like, Maybe Peter, yeah, because he's just hilarious. So I think above all, they have to be super funny.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week. Where can people go to find more from you?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at It's Sarah Amini. That's where I post the majority of my acting work. And then my website is sarahamini.com. That's where you can see more of my book related work. And yeah, I think those are the two. I'm really not on the other ones.
That's fair. It's
Yeah,
hard to navigate all of that now, but
it's too much. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's too much.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Great interview.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us on the podcast today. Guys, please go check out Mixed Feelings wherever you get your books. I guarantee you are going to find something in it to relate to. Reminder, guys, we will be off the air next week. That is the week of April 27th, 2026. But we will return the following Monday with a brand new episode of the podcast. So just stick around, follow us over on social media to kind of find all of our updates and what all is going on over there. We are at Writers Black Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can also find us over on your podcasting platform of choice. That is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or even on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and watch all the faces as they talk about books and writing. And God, we are what, 24 episodes into the season? You'd think I would be better at this part of it by now, but nope, still just rambling along as I tend to do from time to time. But please find us over on your podcasting platform of choice. Leave us a thumbs up or a stars, or give us a comment. We'd love to hear from you guys. Also, if you or someone you know wants to be part of the show, please send us an email. Send that to writersblackpod@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Until next time, I've been Greg. You've been awesome, and keep writing. Writer's Black is a Good Nerd Media production. Hosted by Greg Nikas. Produced by Grimothy Kaus. Produced and edited by Greg Nikas. Special thanks to Sarah Amini and Martha Kiley.